Sign from God. Biggest tragedy just happened in Jerusalem. The whole world is scared.
Thrusters at work, illuminated by the rising sun while the ground below remains in darkness.
Another video from a different angle appears to show the light doing the same thing. Those clips have gone viral now.
They see through them at all. This happened in February.
2 minutes ago, something shifted in Jerusalem, not as a rumor or a theory, but as a convergence that can no longer be ignored. The sky darkened as living swarms moved unnaturally, while silent spiral lights twisted overhead without warning. Water erupted violently from beneath the ground. The earth trembled near sacred places. Unexplained light appeared above holy sites, and in some areas, the land itself opened suddenly. These events did not unfold separately, but pressed together in the same moment, surrounding a place history has always marked as a turning point. This is not fear-mongering and not prediction, but it may be warning, because when signs converge here, the world has never remained unchanged for long. Stay with this. Leave what you're seeing in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss what unfolds next. Over Jerusalem, the night sky no longer behaves like a passive backdrop because white-blue light has begun pulsing outward in a spiral formation that arrests attention instantly and refuses easy dismissal. These lights do not flash chaotically or streak across the sky like meteors, but unfold slowly and deliberately, forming rotating patterns clearly visible to the naked eye, as if the heavens themselves are tracing a signal rather than suffering a malfunction. What makes the phenomenon unsettling is not just what appears, but what does not. There are no explosions to anchor it to warfare or debris, no seismic vibrations to tie it to the ground, and no mechanical roar to explain it away as technology. The sky remains silent even as it moves, and that silence intensifies the impact because it removes panic while heightening awareness. Witnesses describe a sudden stillness settling over the city, a shared instinct to stop, look up, and listen, even though no sound initially accompanies the light. Yet silence does not last. Alongside these spiral formations, reports emerge of powerful, echoing sounds resembling trumpets reverberating through the air. Not sharp blasts, but sustained, resonant tones that feel both distant and overwhelming. The sound does not originate from a single direction, nor does it behave like construction, aircraft, or weather, because it rolls through the atmosphere with a force that feels ceremonial rather than mechanical. In Jerusalem, a city layered with memory and meaning, that detail matters, because sound has always marked moments of transition there. No single, agreed-upon explanation has followed. Atmospheric theories circulate. Experimental technology is suggested. Optical effects are debated. Yet none of these fully account for the precision of the spiral, the consistency of the sightings, or the accompanying trumpet-like sounds reported during the same time frame. Each explanation removes surface fear, but leaves a deeper unease untouched, because it explains how something might happen without explaining why it feels intentional. The global reaction reflects that tension. Footage spreads rapidly. Experts argue publicly. Skeptics and believers clash. The debate intensifies not because clarity is emerging, but because it is not. When certainty fails, meaning rushes in to fill the gap, and Jerusalem becomes the focal point once again, not by declaration, but by convergence. Scripture has long framed such moments not as chaos, but as signals that precede greater movement. The words carry weight precisely because they are unspecific. There will be signs in the heavens. The verse does not announce dates or outcomes, yet it lingers when the sky begins behaving outside familiar boundaries. Especially above a city history has never treated as incidental. If the sky can send signals over Jerusalem without noise, without fire, and without permission, the urgency is not in predicting what comes next, but in recognizing that ignoring such moments has never proven wise. Stay with this, because what follows does not arrive randomly. After the sky above Jerusalem refused to remain quiet, the warning did not stay overhead, because what followed came from below. Forcing attention back to the ground, humanity has always trusted too easily. Beneath terrain long treated as solid and predictable, towering columns of water suddenly burst upward, erupting without build-up or warning, as if the pressure accumulating beneath the surface had reached a limit and could no longer be contained. These were not gentle springs or gradual seepages, but violent surges that split open the earth and hurled water and steam skyward with astonishing force, transforming ordinary ground into an opening that felt less like geology and more like exposure. Witnesses often describe a moment of disbelief before fear, because the mind struggles to accept how quickly stability vanishes. 1 second the land appears calm, and the next it is breached, releasing roaring plumes that soak the air and shake the senses. The sound is not sharp like an explosion, but deep and resonant, a low grinding roar that seems to rise from far below reach, carrying the unsettling impression that something vast has shifted beneath the surface. Thick vapor distorts visibility, sunlight bends through moisture, and familiar landscapes become unrecognizable stages where hidden forces briefly assert themselves. What deepens the disturbance is what follows the eruption. As water settles back into rivers and channels, fish begin to surface lifeless in alarming numbers, their bodies floating motionless across pools and streams that once sustained them. The water often carries an unusual discoloration and a sharp, sulfur-like odor, suggesting that what was released came not from shallow layers, but from deeper, older systems disturbed suddenly and violently. Life that depended on these waters collapses almost immediately, turning a source of sustenance into an environment of death with no transition period. Alongside the eruptions and die-offs, other anomalies are frequently reported. Ground tremors ripple faintly through nearby areas without registering as earthquakes. Strange echoes travel through valleys long after the water subsides, and at night, unexplained lights or glows are sometimes seen hovering above the affected regions, as though the disturbance below has consequences above as well. These details do not always make headlines, but together they create an atmosphere of unease that resists simple explanation. Science can describe pressure buildup, geothermal heat, and chemical reactions beneath the crust, yet these explanations struggle to address the emotional weight left behind. Numbers may explain how a geyser forms, but they do not explain why it feels like a message rather than an accident. The realization settles in that control extends only as far as the surface, and even that control is temporary, dependent on forces that remain unseen and unmanaged. When the final column of water collapses and the land grows quiet again, the stillness does not feel reassuring. It feels provisional. Everyone present understands that nothing beneath the ground has been resolved, only expressed. Pressure has been released, but not eliminated, and the earth returns to silence, carrying the unspoken question of how much more remains hidden below, and how long that silence is meant to last before the next breach forces humanity to look down again. The shaking near Jerusalem did not arrive as open disaster, yet its impact reached far beyond cracked walls or fallen debris, because these minor earthquakes carried a precision that felt intentional rather than accidental. The tremors were shallow, irregular, and distinctly unusual, appearing close enough to be felt clearly, but stopping short of catastrophic force, as if the ground itself were choosing restraint. They did not follow familiar seismic patterns, and that deviation alone was enough to draw global attention. What followed, the tremors intensified the unease. Animals reacted before many people fully understood what was happening. Dogs began barking uncontrollably and breaking restraints. Livestock bolted from enclosures, and birds scattered suddenly from resting places, abandoning normal behavior as if responding to a threat humans could not yet interpret. This was not gradual restlessness, but immediate panic, movement driven by instinct rather than noise or visible danger. Such reactions are not unfamiliar in seismic history, yet their timing here is critical. The earthquakes were not strong enough to justify such widespread animal response, which makes the behavior harder to dismiss. Animals fled, even as structures remained standing, suggesting that what they sensed went beyond surface movement. Their response echoed earlier patterns seen before larger geological shifts elsewhere, where instinct registers changes long before instruments detect escalation. Residents described a strange sequence: a brief tremor, objects rattling lightly, followed almost immediately by the sound of animals in distress and motion. Streets did not collapse, yet calm evaporated. The earth settled quickly, but the panic among living creatures lingered, leaving behind a sense that something had been triggered beneath the surface without being resolved. Jerusalem's setting magnifies the weight of these moments. This is a region intensely monitored and historically mapped, which makes anomalies difficult to ignore. Scientists acknowledge the tremors, but struggle to frame them as routine because their distribution and timing resist standard models. The added layer of animal behavior deepens that uncertainty, because it introduces a biological response where geological data alone feels incomplete. Scripture speaks directly to moments like this, not as isolated disasters, but as part of a broader pattern of warning. Nation will rise against nation, and there will be earthquakes in various places, Jesus said, emphasizing occurrence rather than magnitude. The warning was never about one massive event, but about signs appearing in sequence, testing awareness rather than destroying without notice. Here, the destruction is subtle but profound. Buildings survive, yet confidence erodes. Life continues, yet certainty fractures. The ground moves just enough to be felt. Animals flee as if danger approaches, and then everything appears calm again, creating a dangerous illusion that the moment has passed. Jerusalem has never been neutral ground in history, and even small disturbances here tend to carry disproportionate meaning. When the earth trembles lightly and animals react violently, it suggests that pressure exists beneath the surface, held back rather than released. Warning does not always arrive with collapse. Sometimes it arrives measured, controlled, and unsettling, precisely because it stops short. These earthquakes do not declare an ending, but they interrupt complacency. They ask whether warning is being recognized or merely endured and forgotten, because history shows that when instinct reacts and reason delays, the cost of delay has never been small. Share what you think this means in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to stay watchful. Following the unusual tremors and the sudden flight of animals, another phenomenon began to surface, one that did not shake the ground or scatter life, yet carried a weight many found harder to dismiss. Near and directly above sacred sites, lights began to appear without warning, lingering just long enough to be witnessed, then vanishing as abruptly as they arrived. These were not steady beacons or distant glows, but sharp manifestations of light that pierced the darkness briefly, as if marking specific locations rather than illuminating the surrounding sky. What makes these appearances unsettling is their lack of an identifiable source. There are no storms, no aircraft paths, no electrical failures to point to, and no consistent angle from which the light originates. It does not descend visibly from above or rise clearly from below. Instead, it simply appears, contained and precise, often hovering directly over places long regarded as spiritually significant. The light leaves no scorch marks, no heat damage, no physical trace at all. Yet its impact on those who witness it is immediate and lasting. Observers consistently describe the same reaction, not panic, but a sudden stillness, similar to what followed the tremors before. Conversations stop, movement slows, attention narrows. The light does not behave aggressively, but it does not feel passive either. Its presence feels intentional, as though it is revealing rather than illuminating, pointing without explaining. When it disappears, the darkness feels heavier than before, not because the light was bright, but because its absence feels deliberate. What distinguishes these lights from common aerial phenomena is their location. They are not random points in the sky, but appear repeatedly near sites associated with worship, prayer, and history. That specificity strips away many casual explanations and replaces them with unease, because coincidence becomes harder to defend when repetition aligns with meaning. The lights do not damage stone or structure, yet they seem to disturb something deeper, challenging the assumption that sacred spaces are immune to interruption. Scripture has long framed light as more than a physical property. Light reveals, exposes, and separates what is seen from what is hidden. One verse captures this tension with clarity. The light shines in the darkness. The statement does not describe conquest or force, but persistence, suggesting that light appears not to destroy darkness instantly, but to confront it quietly and unmistakably. Placed alongside the trembling ground and the instinctive response of animals, these lights add another layer to the pattern already forming. The earth moves without collapse. Life reacts without explanation. Light appears without source. Each event is restrained, measured, and incomplete on its own. Yet, together, they create a sequence that feels purposeful rather than accidental. The lights do not announce an ending, and they do not demand belief, but they resist indifference. They leave behind a question that lingers long after the darkness returns. If places set apart are being marked without damage or noise, what is being revealed? And why now? Under ordinary streets and familiar buildings, a hidden tension grows in silence, unseen and unmeasured, until the moment arrives when the surface can no longer pretend to be solid. There is no dramatic buildup, no cinematic warning, only the instant when pavement folds inward and the world drops away, as if gravity itself has been given permission to take more than it ever has before. 1 second, life stands on firm ground. The next, that ground is gone. What unsettles people is not just the destruction, but the betrayal, because the collapse comes from below, from a place assumed to be stable, dependable, unquestionable. Roads do not crack politely, they disappear. Houses do not crumble gradually, they slide, tilt, and are erased, swallowed by a darkness that feels deeper than measurement. The earth does not shake to announce danger, it simply opens, leaving shock in its wake. Footage from above reveals shapes that look intentional rather than accidental. Vast circular voids carved with frightening precision, as if the land itself decided to withdraw its support. Cars sit at impossible angles, roofs vanish, and entire neighborhoods are left staring into emptiness, struggling to comprehend how something so solid could fail so completely. There is panic at first, then silence, the kind that follows an event too sudden for emotion to catch up. Experts speak calmly of subsurface erosion, dissolving rock, and water slowly hollowing space beneath the surface. Yet these explanations do little to quiet the instinctive fear, because understanding the mechanism does not explain the timing. Why here? Why now? Why without warning? The science may describe the process, but it cannot answer the deeper unease that follows when safety feels provisional. What spreads globally are the images, replayed again and again, not because they are sensational, but because they are destabilizing. Viewers recognize something primal in them, a reminder that civilization rests on layers thinner than comfort allows. The ground is no longer just ground. It becomes a threshold, something that can open, remove, and erase without negotiation. Across history, the image of the Earth opening has carried weight far beyond physical collapse, symbolizing judgment, exposure, and the sudden removal of what people relied upon most. Scripture captures this fear with unsettling clarity. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them. The words feel ancient, yet the visuals feel modern, as if the distance between past warning and present reality has narrowed. What remains after the collapse is not only a hole in the ground, but a fracture in certainty. Sinkholes do not roar like storms or burn like fire. They consume quietly, decisively, leaving absence where confidence once stood. They force an uncomfortable realization that stability is not guaranteed, that what holds us up can fail without announcement. If these moments make you stop and reflect, share what went through your mind in the comments, and subscribe to stay with us as more layers of what is unfolding continue to surface. What first appears on the horizon resembles an approaching storm, yet something about it feels deeply wrong, because storms roll and break. While this darkness advances with intention, the air grows tense before a single sound is heard, and then the shape sharpens into something far more unsettling than weather. It is not cloud, not smoke, not shadow. It is movement. A vast swarm of locusts rises and spreads outward, multiplying as it moves until the sky itself seems to thicken, as though daylight is being slowly drained away by countless beating wings. As the swarm expands, the blue above fades into a bruised, trembling haze, and the sun remains visible yet weakened, filtered through living layers that turn open space into something almost solid. Shadows stretch and distort across the ground, while a low, vibrating roar fills the air, created by millions of bodies moving as one. The sound presses into streets and fields alike, surrounding everything, leaving no place untouched. Vehicles slow, then stop entirely, not because of wreckage or fire, but because sight itself begins to fail, and instinct takes control. People step out, shield their faces, and stare upward, caught between disbelief and fear, watching the sky behave in a way it never should. Within hours, ordinary life fractures. Roads clog, flights are grounded, crops disappear beneath the moving mass, and entire regions are forced into stillness. This is not destruction by flood or flame, but by consumption, as green landscapes are stripped bare with relentless efficiency, leaving behind exposed earth and an unnatural quiet. What unsettles observers most is not only the damage, but the scale. Because these swarms do not remain isolated, they emerge across distant regions almost simultaneously, unfolding in eerily similar fashion, as though guided by an unseen signal rather than chance. Science explains the mechanics through monsoon winds, shifting climates, and intensified migratory cycles. And those explanations are real and measurable, yet they fail to quiet the unease. Data can map movement and predict behavior, but it cannot explain why watching the sky turn alive awakens something ancient in the human spirit. There is a recognition that precedes reason, a memory older than modern instruments, because this sight has been witnessed before. Long before satellites tracked weather and cameras captured evidence, Scripture described a moment like this with chilling clarity. Before them, the earth shakes, the heavens tremble, the sun and the moon grow dark. The words speak not only of insects, but of atmosphere, fear, and the sense that nature itself has shifted roles. That is why the image resonates so powerfully now, not as a prediction forced onto events, but as an echo that refuses to fade. When the swarm finally passes, it leaves behind more than damaged fields. It leaves silence, questions, and a lingering awareness of fragility. Familiar landscapes feel altered, voices lower, and memories replay the moment daylight dimmed without night falling. A locust swarm is not merely an environmental event. It is a reminder that control can dissolve without warning, and that when the sky fills with life instead of light, humanity is compelled to stop, look upward, and confront questions it usually avoids. A locust swarm is not merely an environmental event. It is a reminder of fragility, of how quickly control can dissolve, and of how the sky, when filled with life instead of light, forces humanity to stop, look up, and ask questions it rarely wants to face. When these moments are finally placed together, the picture becomes far more unsettling than any single event on its own, because what once appeared scattered across headlines and continents now begins to resemble an advancing sequence rather than coincidence. The disturbances do not cancel each other out, they compound. The pauses between them do not bring relief, they shorten. Across land, beneath the surface, and above the sky, the same pattern repeats with increasing pressure, creating the impression that the world is not merely experiencing disruption, but being carried through a process that is actively unfolding. Scripture approaches this pattern with language that is neither sensational nor dismissive, because it refuses to label these signs as the final collapse, while also refusing to call them meaningless. Instead, it describes a beginning, one marked by birth pains. This metaphor is precise and unsettling, because birth pains are never random, never comfortable, and never mistaken for something trivial. They intensify, they converge, and they signal that something unseen is moving steadily toward revelation. In this framing, the shaking of systems, the unrest of nature, and the unease felt across societies are not endpoints, but indicators that a threshold is being approached. Within this sequence, Jerusalem occupies a role unlike any other, not because of its size or population, but because of what it represents. Every tremor near this city seems to resonate beyond geology, beyond politics, and beyond regional conflict, touching something symbolic that has echoed through centuries of scripture and history alike. Jerusalem has never functioned as an ordinary place, and when movement occurs around it, whether physical, spiritual, or societal, it consistently draws disproportionate attention, as though the city itself stands at the intersection of visible events and invisible meaning. Yet the purpose of this narrative is not to cultivate fear, panic, or obsession, because fear clouds discernment rather than sharpening it. The underlying message is vigilance, watchfulness, awareness, a call to observe without denial and to reflect without rushing toward conclusions that Scripture itself avoids. No dates are declared. No final outcomes are imposed. The ending remains open, not because the story lacks direction, but because the responsibility to perceive and respond rests with each individual conscience. If these connections cause you to pause, if they stir questions rather than certainty, then that pause itself may be the point. Share your thoughts in the comments, like the video if you sense that something is unfolding, and subscribe to continue following this journey as the pattern becomes clearer, step by step. Thank everyone for watching.